If I'm going to be honest with you, Melvin, I found listening to the podcast, listening to the lady's voice. Does the lady have a name, by the way? Do you give a name to that voice, or is it
We
no?
we haven't we haven't. Although she's modelled after an actress, but we haven't named it yet. No.
And do you share that? Do you openly share the name of that actress or the
No
actor?
problem. So the reason why, just to give you a bit of context, is I believe artificial intelligence generally presents two sort of responses in terms of us humans. We generally are fearful of it. Of course, it conjures up the image of Judgment Day, Terminator, Skynet, that sort of thing. Otherwise, we tend to look down upon it in the sense where we think it poses this existential question of which one's better. So overall, if it's not fear, then it's apprehension. So we thought the way to actually try and make it perhaps more accepted by people is to actually find a soothing voice that is human, so that at least when you're listening to it, you feel comfortable with it. It doesn't seem too strange. And so we studied around for the best voice, and we actually set on Gemma Chan, who's an actress, British actress. And it also presents a very interesting question of ethics, because we have the technology to actually model it entirely like her voice, but then it raises a question of whether that's ethical. And certainly there's no law against that. But I think we're moving into a realm today where questions like this are posed, whether it's actually legal to do stuff like this. But for us, so we built something similar to a voice, inspired by a voice, but not exactly the same. But ideally, a soothing voice that you listen to, that presents a very comfortable experience, and hopefully one that people enjoy listening to.
Indeed.
So we haven't named her yet, but I
No.
suppose we could name her maybe Emma or something along the lines. Yeah.
Or perhaps yeah, or even yeah, take ownership of it with an Asian name, of course, isn't it? That might be.
We could.
And like you say, I've already assigned a gender to this voice, which is interesting, isn't it? That's
Right.
indeed, absolutely,
Yes.
yeah, great. Listening again, I found it because I knew I was listening to a computer-generated voice. I did find it a very unsettling experience. I did, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I mean, it's it was something I hadn't really experienced before, but it did remind me of something I'd heard before about how the more lifelike a robot is, the more human-like it is, the more unsettling it is to be with that robot. Is that again because I could feel to myself that it wasn't purely a human voice, but it was very close. And so, would you put it? Is that the move to make it even more human, or I don't know what it's all those different feelings. I mean, how do you respond to that?
And I think that's a perfectly reasonable response, and certainly something that we anticipate. And I think, yes, you're indeed right. If you listen to the Empirics podcast at the moment, it sounds quite human, but it's not exactly there. And the reason why is because human speech, at least in our study of it as we're developing it, it is very complicated, especially human conversation, because besides just the voice, there's also a lot of things going on, tonality and many elements of it. And also how emotional you sound. For example, for our AI, it can't actually deliver jokes well. It isn't humorous.
There was no humor. Yes.
Yeah, and we've had one or two episodes where I think it tried to tell a joke, and it wasn't. It was just strange to actually listen to it. So it's all about time. It's a very complicated process, of course, as we know in human conversation. But what you said is totally valid. I can understand why, if something sounds more human, it's unsettling. Because again, as I was talking about, it draws us back to this existential question. As these technology are becoming more human-like, and yet they are more capable than us, then what does that leave us? Where does that leave us? And what does it mean for our future? And certainly I can tell you this, the Empirics AI is incredibly capable. In my spare time, I have a hobby. I actually have a YouTube channel, so I share some personal thoughts. And I'm sure as well, Matthew, with you, with the Epson initiative, there's a question of what episodes should we do? What should we talk about? What could be relevant? And so we're taking time to think. But for us, it's a very sort of guesswork, really. Yet the AI is able to process thousands of data sets to get to the bottom of what's relevant and study data really well to potentially create better episodes. And again, it's a question whether any of us, as you know, YouTubers or podcasters, are able to actually learn from every episode. But yet the AI is designed to do it in a very superhuman way. And so the more human it sounds, of course, it is very unsettling. It raises these questions. And one thing's for sure, it is going to sound even more human because the technology is, you know, expanding and developing exponentially. But to me, I think I can understand the fear, yet at the same time, I don't think we should be too fearful because, again, there are a lot of benefits of AI. I don't think they will entirely replace us humans, certainly. They'll be very good at certain things, but they will not be very good at other things. So, for example, as I was mentioning earlier about humor, I don't see, and I hope not, but I just don't see, at least in the foreseeable future, we will see a Netflix stand-up, you know, special coming from an AI anytime soon. It would be very, very difficult to do so, again, just based on what we understand of technology now. And perhaps, and also a question whether it will be the same thing. So I think certain things will still remain within the realms of human, if you will, and there's certain other things which are more suited for perhaps AI and automation. We will see more developments there. But even with automation, I think, in economy, in industries, I don't think it's a doomsday sort of scenario that jobs will be lost all of a sudden and we'll see widespread unemployment. I think what we'll see is actually certain roles will be made obsolete for sure, and the industrial landscape is going to change. But at the same time, that's going to create new opportunities and also bring about, you know, better innovations economy that will benefit us. So automation is not really this thing that's all of a sudden new. We've seen it time and time again throughout history, from early industrialization till now. And of course, people time and time again are afraid of what the ramifications of technologies are. But so far, what we've seen is more to do with obsolescence rather than, you know, just general unemployment. And so I think it's important for us to understand what's happening, understand these technologies, and also develop relevant skill sets that certainly will make us fit into this new industrial landscape of the future.
I mean, it's utterly fascinating. And as you're speaking, I'm wanting to go in all sorts of different directions with the thoughts and so on. But the thing that struck me and made me feel a little bit unsettled was this: the AI voice, Emma, if you like, whatever, was using words like "we" and "us." And I was thinking, well, who is the "we" here? If this is a computer speaking, who is the "we" that she's talking about in that particular sense? So I think this was one of it was in the end of Plastic. It was talking about, it said, most importantly, we must let go of our way of thinking, and our dependency on those things that are hurting us most. So who was Emma talking about there? Was she talking about herself, the computer, or was she talking about us as humans? And on whose authority was she making those comments?
So in this instance, she's actually referring to us humans. It would be quite scary if all of a sudden she's talking on the behalf of all the computers out there and our devices. I think that's the start of it, some sort of a dystopian movie. But she's actually referring to us humans, but totally valid. And I entirely understand. It is a bit unsettling and strange because, of course, you know, here all of a sudden we have this AI who's making this general statement on behalf of us humans. But again, you know, to understand where it's coming from, the AI is actually making these deductions based on the content and the information that we have on our platform. So it's not making its own opinion in that sense, but it's actually aggregating a lot of data together to come to that conclusion. And so if you understand what you're listening to is essentially an AI that's working with a platform that is very much by humans for humans, but augmented by an AI that's delivering information concisely and making deductions based on that information, then it's a bit more understandable. But certainly, yes, I understand when you hear something like that, it seems it's a start of an uprising, but I can assure you, no, far from it. Yeah.